You're listening to the Visionary Lifestyle Podcast, the show that's dedicated to raising consciousness and empowering you to activate your highest potential. I'm your host, Magda Freedom Rod. Hi guys, I'm back from my break in the Spanish desert. I went to a European Burning Man festival called Nowhere and had a lot of fun building a camp, feeding the build crew lots of high vibe, conscious eating food at our camp, as well as teaching yoga, teaching the chakras, discovering awe-inspiring creative projects, and connecting with like-minded people. I also lost my voice for 5 days because of the tremendous amount of dust and windstorms. So if my voice sounds a little off to you today, that's why. I drove to Paris from Spain yesterday, where I'll be practicing some yoga and maybe catching some interviews for the show, before I head back to Spain to attend the yoga conference in Barcelona, where I hope to get some interviews there as well. If you guys want to follow my YOMAD, as in Yoga Nomad travel adventures, you can find me on Instagram at Visionary Lifestyle Guide. And of course, the IG for the show is Visionary Lifestyle Podcast. So today's guest is Jules Febre. And I definitely have to say it the French way because I'm in Paris right now. Jules Febre. Jules was born and raised in a section of New York City known as the Lower East Side. At the age of only 13, he spent 3 months in India, 2 of which were spent in Mysore studying Ashtanga Yoga with Pattabhi Jois. During that time, he was invited to share satsang with Swami Nirmalananda and Shyam, 2 radical yogis that have each contributed greatly to the progression of yoga in the West. At the age of 16, Jules began working at the Jivamukti Yoga School, helping to clean, and is now considered one of the leading teachers of the Jivamukti Yoga method, teaching the method worldwide as well as facilitating at the very highly regarded teacher training programs. Jules travels and teaches for a major part of the year, including Europe, Australia, Asia, and more. His classes offer a wide range and depth of understanding of Yoga Asana as well as meditation, chanting, and yoga philosophy. I met Jules in India where he was teaching at the International Yoga Festival in Rishikesh, where we recorded this interview in a garden at the Parmarth Nikatan Ashram. Jules is a bit different than most of the yoga teachers I've met. He has a wicked sense of humor that he brings into his classes. And he's clearly very well studied, and only when he speaks do you realize his tremendous depth. In this interview, we discuss a lot of things, including the 5 tenets of the Jivamukti Yoga practice, the yogic perspective on veganism, his experience teaching in correctional facilities, yoga beyond the 8 limbs, the importance of planting seeds, and Jules gives us a deep explanation of what it means to live the first tenet of yoga, ahimsa. As always, notes to things discussed are in the show notes, which you can find on the blog post for this episode at visionary-lifestyle.com/podcast. Enjoy and namaste. Jules Febre, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Also known as Jules Febre.
Jules Febre.
For those of us who speak French.
Yeah, which doesn't include me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, even with 2 French names.
Oh la la. But at least your own name you can pronounce, I suppose.
Yeah.
You probably speak more French than you realize you do.
I appreciate that vote of confidence.
Yes.
It's very kind of you.
My pleasure. So it's such a treat to meet you. I took one of your classes yesterday. We are, just for the audience so they know, we're at the International Yoga Festival here in Rishikesh, India. And you're going to hear a bit of background noise because it's a lively place. We're sitting in another one of the beautiful gardens here in the middle of the afternoon. Jules just taught his last class of the festival, Hip Hop Asana. Good times. This is your 3rd year teaching at the festival, right?
3rd year teaching. Every year it's a little bit different in terms of what I offer. The hip hop asana is, even though I don't enjoy teaching it so much, it's a crowd pleaser. People like it. But the reason I don't enjoy teaching it in this situation is because it started off, I teach a lot of in New York in probation centers and youth development programs. So for what most of society calls at-risk youth. And I don't show up playing Hare Krishna music. I use hip hop as the bridge, and the yoga practices are the unknown. And so the hip hop has been this inspiration for me to bring yoga back to the places that I came from and had to go to, including my old high school, a probation center of which I was a client. And that is, so it's a little bit of a switch for me then to teach yoga and hip hop outside of that. Because a lot of people have no connection to hip hop at all.
Right.
Not everyone, but most people don't. So, and I'm not a hip hop teacher. And I'm not there to be like performing and up on stage. So it can get, it turns it into a show, basically, which is not my favorite. But people like it, it gets them in. And then once they're in, I hit them over the head with veganism and these kinds of things.
Beautiful. Yeah, we're gonna go deep into the conscious eating veganism conversation, but I want to stick on the yoga for a bit more. So you started yoga at age 6, is that right?
It's true.
How did that happen?
Sharon Gannon and David Life, who are the co-founders of Jivamukti Yoga, are also my aunt and uncle. And they started, my mother sacrificed her firstborn child, me, to the yoga gods for experimentation. And so I started practicing when I was 6. I originally came to India when I was 13. I practiced in the old shala with Pattabhi Jois, 2 months, first shift, 4:30 a.m., something like that. Then I spent a month in North India traveling with Shyam Das, who's another great teacher, Pushti Marg guy. And and I had some breaks sometimes where I didn't feel like ever looking at a yoga person ever again. And kind of in and out, but I've been teaching for the past 12 years, and I've been pretty consistent with the practice probably for 15, 20 years, something like that.
Wow, that's fantastic. And your classes are super fun, and you have a great sense of humor.
Tell me more.
And this is, well, you came and you sat down on my leg when I was doing a Warrior 2 in the class, and I thought that was pretty bold.
Yeah. Well, it was also nice because you kept giving me the look, like the wink, and telling me to sit on your lap, so I wasn't sure what.
Right. You remember what I did? Do you remember what I did when you sat?
You tapped me on the shoulder?
No, I kissed you on the shoulder.
Oh, you big softie.
Yeah, it was fun. It was just like, it's giggles the whole time, and your soundtrack was amazing, and the practice was pretty challenging. That's pretty advanced practice. I liked your joke in the middle of it too. This was the 0.5 level class, and everybody's like sweating, and you're a little bit of a slave driver in that class, just like really calling people, to their highest expression of yoga.
Yeah, or at least somewhere on their way to it.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes we lose track that either we have to be a serious yoga practitioner, or we don't take it serious enough and nobody's a guru and everybody's a guru. And so there's kind of, at least in the West, there's seems to be two ways of doing it. Either super serious or not really giving it enough respect. And I do my best to try to walk that line between the two. Of course, sometimes it means I'm a little bit too silly in class or irreverent, and then on the other hand, sometimes I take it a little bit too serious. But it's what I grew up with. It's what I've been doing pretty much my whole life. And a lot of people, if they're just beginning, think that because it's yoga, it's meant to be soft and relaxed, and all those things will happen, but there needs to be an element of challenge for yourself. And if you're not able to say, all right, I'm going to do this no matter what, then you need somebody else to come in and kind of kick you in the butt a little bit. And it's helpful and it's nice, as long as they can do it with a smile and make a joke, but then expect you still to perform at a higher level than what you were doing before.
Right, so there's value in pushing people outside of their comfort zone in the practice. What does that do for people?
Well, it does something different for everybody. I think it freaks some people out and they run away. Other people find that they were able to raise themselves up to expectation that they didn't think they could meet. A lady came to me today and said, "Oh, thank you. You know, I've never done any of these things, and I probably would have never done them if you didn't push me like you did." And that's great, but you know, there's also a fine line, right? You don't want to push somebody so far that they injure themselves or go over the edge. But it's important that the person who's doing the pushing has an experience of being pushed themselves. Right? So I had the experience of doing the pose one way, and I had the experience of doing the asana another way, and on like that until I found something that really worked, not just for me, but for many different body types. And it's important that a person who's challenging others has had that experience. Otherwise, there's a subtle message that is communicated that disallows the student to trust the teacher, because it's coming from an idea instead of a feeling. But when you're able to teach from a feeling of experience and knowing what they are going to be feeling, that allows for empathy, right? A connection of the suffering of another, compassion. And then it also gives you the understanding of what to do in that moment, how to be of service. Do they need to pull back? Do they need to go further? Even if they're crying, do they need to go further? Do they need to go and take a Shivananda yoga class? You know, do they need to be somewhere else? And it also takes a lot of courage on this part of the teacher, because they're often afraid of scaring people away. Because if people leave, then money leaves. So challenging somebody also allows for trust to build if you do it correctly, and shows the authenticity of the teacher.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility for you teaching these advanced asanas and being able to gauge the room and you know, some pretty big classes you're teaching, right? So also the woman that was doing the adjustments in your class was incredible. The adjustments I got were just like almost life-altering. So that's part of the teaching, right, is the trainings. You're doing trainings all over the world. I hear you say you're traveling like over 10 months a year?
9 to 10 months out of the year, yeah, I'm on the road. I lead one teacher training a year here in India at Radhanath Swami's Eco Village. Hachi has been studying with me, practicing with me, friends together for a long time. We went to elementary school together, so we know each other a long time.
That's cool.
And some of the people who had just done the teacher training came up, so we had some extra hands on deck. Yeah, it's I don't remember what your question was.
Well, I was just it started with, you know, it's a big responsibility to
Right.
lead all these people through these advanced postures when you don't really know their background, and so it's a lot for you to tune into energetically and just kind of monitor where people are at.
I mean, there's always an element of not knowing, but also, I mean, there's a hope that people won't push themselves further than they can. Because there is this place like where half of the people never practice yoga and half of them are very high level practitioner. So how to lead people through a sequence that offers something for both without boring one or freaking out the other. Yeah, so it's slow. I mean, if you're teaching for an extended period of time, hopefully most of the things that you need to know are shown to you during Surya Namaskar. So I can tell if somebody has a good backbending practice in Surya Namaskar. I can tell if somebody has tight hamstrings. I mean, most people should be able. It's not like rocket science, right? Like you say forward bend and they don't forward bend, then you know there's something that's going on. But then linking to that, to what will happen in the class is a whole nother level of spontaneity, educated spontaneity, I guess.
So the heart of Jivamukti practice is what? What would you say is the heart of it or the foundation of it?
There are 5 tenets for Jivamukti Yoga, which makes for a really easy soundbite.
Yeah, bring it.
The first one is ahimsa, non-harming, which we really take to the end of ethical vegetarianism. Because Patanjali gives ahimsa as a practice in the yamas, which means how to continuously reduce the amount of harm that you're causing, which requires that you look and investigate all of your actions, thoughts, words, and deeds. Then there's bhakti. Having a devotional element to the practice is very important so that it's not dry and mechanical and burns out. but having a sense of devotion allows for one to have an added sense of strength and ability for continuity. I always like the example, cooking for myself is really hard when I'm just at home alone, but if I invite somebody, just even one person, I'm like making 12 courses, I don't need any help with the dishes, I'm super excited because I'm devoted to that person, and it's expressed in my actions, right?
Sweet, yeah.
If any of the listeners have ever tried practicing yoga asana at home, like 5 minutes, like you do the things you like,
Right.
and then like 6 minutes, oh yeah, I should get back to that email. But when you're in the class,
So true.
you have the devotion to the students that are with you, you have the devotion to the teacher. You've also made a commitment to the devotion of practice. You showed up, and all that allows for a deepening and also an increase in strength. Ahimsa Bhakti, dhyana, so a meditative aspect. I guess these days the catchphrase is mindfulness, so having a mindfulness element, but not mindfulness in the sense of mindfulness in action, but sitting down and having a meditation practice that is meant to connect to source, whatever you take source to be. I can't remember who the saying is from, but prayer is speaking to the divine and meditation is listening.
Right, I love that.
And it's also a relatively serious practice that is left out of a lot of asana-based modalities. There's two more. Nada, sound. The power of sound, the sound of your voice, the sound of chanting, of the harmonium, the type of music that we play in class is always uplifting, positive, and in the theme of what is trying to be discussed. Whether it's mantra, whether it's spoken word from Ram Dass or Alan Watts, all the way to, I really enjoy hip-hop instrumentals, right? Or there are some great hip-hop philosophers out there, KRS-One and Zainai, who's from San Francisco. Then we have, the last one is Shastra, which is text, looking at where these teachings are coming from. So they're not 100% divorced from the land that they grew up in, but also so that we are looking at practices that have been tried and proven to be true over an extended period of time. That's what makes something timeless, right? That we know that it was working 2500 BCE, 100 CE, all the way up to the current time. And without being able to look back and say, this is where ahimsa is coming from, this is why they were doing it, then it's difficult for us to really be grounded as teachers and as practitioners.
Right, beautiful. So those are the 5 tenets of Jivamukti, and that originated in New York, is that right?
Originated in New York, Sharon Gannon and David Life. Their teachers, they had 3 main teachers who are with us in all of the teachings. The first is Sri Brahmananda Saraswati, who was an incredible being. He was a neurosurgeon, Indian, spent a lot of time basically growing up in Bombay, moved to New York, and founded Ananda Ashram after doing some studies there and working as a surgeon. Gave that up to become a Swami, sannyas. He also, I don't know if you're aware or if some of the listeners are aware, there's this great book entitled I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, Jnana Yogi. And they had the same guru.
We'll put that in the show notes.
Affectionately called Baba Shri, but it's a fantastic book.
Great resource.
And Sri K. Pattabhi Jois, they spent years and years and years practicing Ashtanga Yoga with Pattabhi Jois. And Swami Nirmalananda, who was just outside of Mysore in the BR Hills, who was silent from the time they met until the time he passed. He practiced Mauna, silence, for 13 or 14 years. But he was very active, writing lots of letters to world leaders. Before his vow of silence, he was in the Indian military, traveled the world, and then became kind of a hermit.
So he's one of the teachers of the original Jivamukti.
Yeah, those 3 are the gurus for Sharon and David.
Gotcha.
And then those of us that are practicing yoga are inspired by those, but our teachers are Sharon and David.
Right on. Yeah, so how many studios are in New York or?
There's one in New York, on Union Square, pun intended. And then there are 3 in Berlin, 3 in Munich, 1 in Sydney, 1 in Moscow, 1 in Mexico, in Puebla, 1 in southern Germany, in Bavaria, Schloss Ilmo. I don't know. There's a few.
There are a bunch of them all over the world.
Yeah.
Then super global. Okay, so all the teacher trainings that you're doing, I imagine that all these studios are being taught by the teachers that come out of the trainings, right?
Oh yeah, no, you can't. There's no. I don't know how other places operate, but right now Jivamukti is a completely free. Right, you don't have to pay any kind of franchise fee or anything like that. But you must have the highest level of certification in order to open up the studio. And you know, there are some requirements like the number of classes that you have to teach that are Jivamukti, but you can also incorporate, if you like Kundalini, you know, have a certain percentage of the classes Kundalini, or if you have a teacher who you really respect and is an Iyengar teacher, they can come in and do that, which also doesn't happen at a lot of yoga studios. It's like purely what they want, or it's a complete mix of everything. It's very rare to have a methodology welcome in other branches.
Right, that's nice. So there's some flexibility there and room to make it your own. If people are thinking about doing a teacher training and trying to figure out which direction to go, that's good information for people. So going back to you teaching in the correctional facilities, did you say that that's where you came from?
Yeah, I mean, when I was 17, I got arrested for armed robbery, 3 counts. And I was not practicing very much yoga at that time. And I had one of these kind of, I guess, life-changing epiphany type moments. I'm sitting in a cell, the lawyer comes out, it's a public defender because I couldn't afford a lawyer. He says, don't worry about it, you'll probably serve 3 to 6 years in Green, which is a facility in upstate New York. But with good behavior and you serve 3/4 of your time, you'll probably do 2 years. So the listeners can't see me, but I'm not the biggest person you've ever met.
Right.
So I was a little bit concerned about that, a little bit nervous. And I just had this feeling. There's this chant that we do at Jivamukti called, it's almost based on the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, you know, make me an instrument.
Sure.
So the chant that we do is, make me an instrument for thy will, not mine, but thine be done. Free me from anger, jealousy, and fear. Fill my heart with joy and compassion. Now, I know we do it at Jivamukti. I don't remember singing it that much, or it's also super corny because you're saying it in English, you know? But I was sitting there and it just kept coming through my mind, kept coming through my mind, kept coming through my mind. I was like, you better shut up and have some tough thoughts. But that's all I could think of, and I realized that in that moment, yoga practice had given me enough space in my mind and in my being that I could see what I had done and realize that I wasn't a victim of circumstance, but I was a co-contributor of the reality that I was experiencing. And that no matter what happened, whether I ended up in jail or not in jail, that I was going to spend more time with yoga. That the sense of joy, the sense of belonging, I mean, these are all reasons why a lot of people in my position do these kinds of actions. Yes, survival is definitely part of it, but part of survival for a human being, we're social animals, being accepted by others, being loved by others. And if we don't have that necessarily at home, or we don't feel like we have it to the extent we want, we go out and find it in other places. And that's part of what I was doing. And so, you know, luckily I got sentenced to 5 years probation. Plus a probation program, plus a couple of other restrictions. Like I had to go, you know, see my PO every week, drug tested, and things like this. But I teach not just for the people who are going through those things. Like I work a lot with Andrew Glover Youth Program, and I was a client there, and I was there for 4 years. But the staff need it too.
Sure.
And, you know, it sucks because you got young, angry people coming in and old, angry people coming in, you know, just in terms of age difference between the two.
Right.
And, you know, one's seen and heard it all before and doesn't care what you say. They're just going to they're going to process you the way they want to process you. And the young people come in also think they know and have seen it all.
Right.
And so you've got this incredible combativeness that happens in most places, not in all places. Overworked and underpaid on both ends.
Right. So you come in to an environment like that and offer classes. How does that work? Is that the kids are one day and the
It's a little bit of
are
a mix.
another, or they're together?
So
or
the youth program is all counselors that live in the neighborhood, or grew up in the neighborhood, Lower East Side, Manhattan. And so yeah, I'll do something with them, with the young people that are there. And then once in a while, the counselors will come down and practice with us. I encourage them to practice with the students. There's a little bit this, and I know that it's definitely helpful, like you separate the boys and the girls, you separate the staff and the clients, but that's what we're doing all the time anyway, and there's this hierarchy that's created that isn't necessarily beneficial because one rebels against it,
Right.
and the other one tries to impose it without necessarily being knowledgeable of or wanting to understand the other person. So when we practice together, it does make it a little bit more difficult to control. Like, the young people are making fun of the counselors are feeling a little bit uncomfortable, the boys and the girls are having their own thing happening. But I would prefer to have a little bit of chaos and everybody work together than to have it more settled and keep separating everyone.
Right. So because yoga is union, right?
Yeah,
so
that's
let's
what
bring them together.
Yeah.
So what kind of results have you seen with these programs? I mean, are you witnessing transformations or?
Yeah, people always want to say, people are always looking for this 90-day transformation thing, right? Like, oh, and then I used to be this way and now I'm this way. It's not that. I mean, look, I had been practicing from when I was 6 years old, and I didn't commit my first felony until I was 17. So who's to say what transformation is really and how long it's going to last? I do know that there's this one, from the high school that I was in, there was this one young girl who was in 10th grade when I started teaching there. I did 3 semesters. She got a job, paid for the Jivamukti teacher training on her own with no assistance from us. She then became a massage therapist, and she worked at Jivamukti for about 4 or 5 years. She grew up in Masaric projects. Her name is Lisa, and she is incredible. And she now is she's inspiring other people around her. They're like, yoga? What are you talking about, yoga? But she's there, she's practicing, she's even, took it to the next level in her mind, which was massage. And there's something, that is not the type of change that can happen over in a week. Maybe for some people if they're really looking for it. But this, more important for me, is that seeds are being planted.
Yes.
Because one of the things that's difficult when it comes to growth is a lack of diverse experience to give you a better understanding of what's happening in the world. And I know that's what yoga gave me. A diverse set of experiences that gave me a better reference point, a better sounding board. That New York and my little neighborhood in New York City wasn't the center of the world.
Right.
And most people, like my dad, he's never had a driver's license, he's never had a passport. He's never really left New York City, maybe just like 2 or 3 times. Definitely never left the country. My mom only traveled outside of the country once or twice, once in college and then once in her 50s or something. And I just saw how having a diverse experience shifted. Even just from my mom and my dad. My mom grew up in Michigan, my dad grew up in the Bronx. Like, their different world views gave them different perspective, and that's what I want to give. That's what I think yoga should give, a little bit of space so they can see that the way you're seeing is just that. It's a world view, and it can change.
Right, that's a perspective, and yoga is a really great tool to help you shift that, and especially when we turn the perspective inward, right, instead of outward. And this is so much of yoga, is turning our attention inward to connect with the higher self, right? Okay, so shifting back to ahimsa. It is the foundation, the first yama, right? And nonviolence, non-harm, and my favorite way to express that is through conscious eating, and it sounds like you're very much on that train as well. When did that start for you?
Yeah. Could you define a little bit for me what conscious eating is? I'm not sure what that means.
Well, conscious eating for me is self-love, animal love, and planet love. So it's every food choice being an opportunity to express love, and being reminded that every food choice is either medicine or poison, not only for ourselves, but also for the planet. So generally, by the research I've done, that means a whole foods plant-based diet is where the conclusion I come to when I do the research about how to do the least harm to the planet and myself and the animals.
Okay, and what was your question again?
When did you get on this path? You mentioned ethical vegetarianism, and you also mentioned veganism.
Yeah, well, I take vegetarian and veganism to be interchangeable terms. Vegetarian means somebody who eats vegetation. Right? So milk is not vegetation, eggs are not vegetation. And then we had to come up with a whole new word that meant what the original word meant. Right? Right, we don't say when we look at animals that animal's an herbivore, but sometimes they eat eggs. Like, no, that's not usually how things work. If you're an herbivore or if you're eating vegetation, you're a vegetarian, that should be what you're eating. Fish is not a vegetable, like, on and on.
Right.
But like I said, I grew up with Yoga and Sharon and David, who are pretty strong advocates for ethical vegetarianism or veganism, however you want to describe it. But I resisted with every ounce of my being. I didn't like vegetables. My dad's Puerto Rican, so like we go to Puerto Rican restaurants, like baked chicken and ribs and all these things. And my mom didn't really care one way or the other. She was a little bit more accepting, but wasn't vegetarian either. And it wasn't until my last year in high school that I met one of the coolest, smartest guys that I had met in a long time, my age, 18, graffiti writer, anarchist, really, you know, smarter than half the teachers there, and he was vegetarian. And it caused me to really do a little bit more research, or at least be more accepting of what people were telling me was happening. And when I graduated high school, that was my gift for myself. I was going to become vegetarian. And of course, I didn't really know what it meant at that time. And so I was still eating eggs and cheese, and that just totally messed with my system. I could feel it right away. Once I took everything else out, I could tell what the eggs and the dairy was doing. So it was only like 2 weeks, and then I was vegan, which is now going on 16, 17 years. And I talk about it as a means, you know, if people are interested in yoga, they're probably interested in ideas like karma and reincarnation. So just from a yogic point of view, it would seem if you wanted to experience less harm in your life, you would cause less harm. I mean, so that's the way I speak to yogis about it. You mentioned Patanjali, ahimsa, yamas. I mean, Patanjali's also pretty smart compiler when he compiled these teachings, because he gives a list, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, right, the 8 limbs. And then he lists what are the 5 yamas. Then right after that, I mean, it's almost like a definition of terms, right? Now, Atta Yoga Nushasanam, then Yoga Chitta Vritti, like so. Now I'm going to talk about yoga. What is yoga? Now I'm going to talk about the yamas. What are the yamas? Here are the yamas. Well, what is ahimsa? What can you expect to see if you practice ahimsa? And he says ahimsa pratishtayam, that is to be pratishtayam, to be established in ahimsa. Tat sanidau vaira tyagaha, that taught when you're established in that practice of ahimsa. Tyagaha, which is renouncing of vaira, hostility. People are no longer hostile towards you. You can also understand it in terms of, because you are so interested in seeing the essential nature of the other being that you would never want to harm that you stop identifying so much with the part of you that could be harmed. Right? So it's not my body, it's not my mind. And the example I always like to bring up is Mahatma Gandhi was one of the biggest proponents of ahimsa, but he was murdered. So how do we reconcile these two teachings? One says violence, you'll cease to be experiencing violence. And here we have one of the greatest contemporary examples. And it is also said that when he laid there clutching his chest, he was also repeating the names of Ram. He wasn't so connected to his body. He wasn't wanting to deal with hate or anger. Or Martin Luther King, another great example. I've decided to stick with love. Hate is too heavy a burden to bear.
Yes.
A hymn, the practice of ahimsa gets you to that place. For most of us. I mean, some of us are born, highly elevated souls, and they're like, no, I love everybody. Most of us need some practice.
Right.
And what better way to practice than to not kill somebody so you can eat? I mean, of course, you look at a movie like Cowspiracy, you look at the incredible amount of resources, greenhouse gases. If you're a yogi who's also an environmentalist, you can't call yourself an environmentalist and eat milk and meat and dairy.
Right.
If you're serious about it.
Right.
If you really know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm on that train right along with you. So Cowspiracy, for me, when that came out, it was a huge hallelujah moment for me, because everything that I've been thinking about, practicing myself, was suddenly there was a piece of media that I could point people to that just really broke it all down, and suddenly they didn't have to listen to me preaching anymore, and it was just, here's all the statistics, go watch it for yourself. An hour and a half of your life, you might make a different decision once you are actually informed. So it was out of the inspiration from that film that I created my conscious eating e-course, to help people, to give people the tool, because like you said, you went vegetarian, but you didn't know what to eat, you didn't know what to do, what that even meant. So there's an education that needs to happen, because our culture, as you know, is so conditioned to believe that we need to eat animal products to be healthy, right? So there's some education that needs to happen around that. So I'm really grateful to Kip Anderson, and it came up in our conversation on the way walking over here that he's actually a student of yours. He's the director of the film, right?
He's the director of the film. I believe also the film was really his idea. It's his baby.
Yeah.
And he came to the Jivamukti teacher training, and he told me that he was working on, I think he was already working on the film at this time when he came, and I have to say, yes, was he there? Was I his mentor? Yeah, but I would put myself in the role of his student, because once the month ended at least, because he found a way to, like you said, he found a way to speak to people that's not aggressive, still gets the point home, allows for there to be an intelligent dialogue instead of, do you know this movie Earthlings?
Yes.
I mean, it has a powerful effect, but it causes a lot of people to be reactionary. Right? They can't watch it, it's too intense for them.
It's very violent.
It's a snuff film.
Kip's movie is not violent. There's one scene that has some violence, but it's easily avoided. And I find most people, when I try to turn them onto the film, they go, oh, I can't watch any more of these horror docs. And it's like, no, this one is just education. It's graphs. It's a well-told story, and it's super educational. So I think he did an incredible job with it. He did an incredible job. And and in that way, he's teaching me to be a better communicator. And he really felt passionate about this, and he put the information out there. And he is educating on a massive scale, and it's incredible. But yes, he comes, every once in a while. If he's around and he's free, he'll come to take my class. And I look forward to the day when I can take his class. Yeah, and he's making a new film, you said, right?
Yeah, What the Health, keep an eye out for that. It's premiering at Jivamukti in New York.
Oh, great.
Like yesterday or tomorrow or today, something like this.
Oh, like presently. That's fantastic. Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely put links to that in the show notes as well. What else do you think is important for people to know about yoga, to live a yogic lifestyle? Because yoga, more than the third limb, right? More than the physical practice. What are the other most important ways that people can live a more yogic lifestyle to be a true yogi?
I don't know about a true yogi.
Working their way closer, or following the yogic path, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I would say, there's kind of these two schools of thought. One of them is that yoga has lost its traditional roots and its Hindu roots. And there are a lot of people, mostly Indians, who feel that it's been appropriated and misappropriated. And because, and in that process has lost some of its essential teachings. I don't know if that's true, because my way of thinking about it is, first of all, yoga is bigger than Patanjali. It's bigger than the 8 limbs. The 8 limbs make up something like 31 verses out of 196 verses of the Yoga Sutra. I mean, I think the 8 limbs are overemphasized for the most part. And there's a misunderstanding about the other realms in which yoga exists. A lot of which have pretty strong religious connotations. And I think because people are afraid of that, they leave those things out. I can only say what my practice is and what the things that I do to become a better yoga practitioner. You know, I was listening, do you ever listen to Krista Tippett on Being?
No.
Oh my gosh, it will change your life.
Okay, we'll find a link.
She has
put it in the show notes.
She has this great podcast. She interviews people, and she's interviewing this rabbi, and he says that, you know, at the end of my life, I want my tombstone to read. I can't remember the guy's name. He's very famous, but so I want my tombstone to read. Here lies, in his name, he did his best to be a good Jew. Right? And I feel the same way. That when I leave this body, I just want people to know that I did my best. And doing my best means being open-minded, going deep into, you know, yogis love to talk about sat, truth, my truth, your truth, different levels of truth. In Vedic understanding, the truth is but one, and it is the ignorant who multiply it. And satsang is coming together with like-minded people to find out what the truth is, no matter where it leads you, no matter how uncomfortable it gets, no matter if it's the violence that you see in an Earthlings type film. And if you say you can't watch the violence, then you should have already made the changes. But if you don't want to see it and you don't want to make the change, then I would say this is not a yoga practice. It's not a spiritual practice, and it's not a practice of just being honest with yourself. And I think yoga at its core is the practice of self-reflection so that we can have the tools to make informed decisions about how we're affecting the world around us.
I love that.
And within us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's raising our awareness in that way. I love that. I think that's a beautiful place to end it. You just nailed it with that one. Thank you so much for your time today and for your offering here at the Yoga Festival. And it's been a real pleasure getting to know you. I'd love to do a training with you someday or come to your studio in New York and maybe continue the conversation another time.
I'll be waiting.
Thank you so much. Namaste.
Namaste.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Conscious Eating 101 e-course. This is a 6-week online course aimed at empowering you to make food choices that are in alignment with your values. The program is based on ahimsa, also known as non-harm, and helps you make every bite that you take an expression of love, self-love, animal love, and planet love. The course offers 15 lessons and 20 nutritious and delicious recipes and is offered over 6 weeks that you can do at your own pace. It includes lessons like plant-based nutrition, protein, dairy alternatives, the story on sugar, GMOs, label reading, and many more. If you're looking to increase your health and happiness, balance your weight, reduce your footprint on the planet, and align your food choices with your values, or are interested in being part of the solution to huge world problems like climate change, rainforest destruction, and world hunger, then this is the course for you. If this speaks to you, please check out consciouseating101.com today. Thanks so much for answering the call to be here today. I'm so glad you're part of our tribe of activated rainbow warriors. If you found the show in any way empowering or inspiring, I would be so grateful if you would share the show on social media or with friends and family that you think would benefit from these conversations. And also, rate and review the show in iTunes. This is really the very best way to help support the show and help us get noticed by others who are looking for the sort of content that we're sharing. Now notice there are no outside ads playing here. That's because the show is supported by you, the listener. You can become a patron of the show with a small monthly donation by checking out the perks on our Patreon page at patreon.com/visionary lifestyle and signing up there. There's also a one-time donation button on the podcast page of the website if that suits you better. And just so you know, your donations help to cover the necessary out-of-pocket monthly expenses to produce the show and will also help us grow so we can inspire and educate even more people. And hey tribe, I'd love to hear from you. Visit me at visionary-lifestyle.com and please tell me your comments and questions. I really look forward to connecting with you. I love you. Namaste.